Throughout history, brilliant minds have created weapons so terrifying that even their own inventors begged for them to be destroyed. These weren't failed experiments or theoretical designs. They were working prototypes that functioned exactly as intended, and that was precisely the problem. What you're about to discover are 10 weapons so advanced, so devastating, that their creators looked at what they had built and made a choice that haunts us to this day. They demanded their own inventions be erased from existence. These stories reveal a chilling pattern. Scientists and engineers who pushed the boundaries of destruction, only to realize they had crossed a line that should never have been approached. Some were silenced, others disappeared. A few managed to destroy their work before it could be unleashed. But the question remains, if these weapons were real, and if they truly worked as described, what does their suppression tell us about the thin line between innovation and annihilation? The weapons you're about to learn about weren't just ahead of their time. They were so far beyond conventional warfare that their very existence threatened to rewrite the rules of conflict forever. And perhaps most disturbing of all, the evidence suggests that some of these technologies may still exist, hidden away in classified vaults, waiting for someone desperate enough to unleash them. Number 1. The molecular dissolution ray. In 1962, deep within a classified research facility outside Los Alamos, physicist Dr. Elena Vasquez made a discovery that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Working on advanced particle beam technology for the Department of Defense, she stumbled upon a frequency that could destabilize molecular bonds at the quantum level. What started as theoretical research into atomic structure became something far more sinister. The device resembled a large telescope mounted on a rotating platform. Its core contained a crystalline array that could generate coherent energy pulses at specific frequencies. When activated, the beam appeared as nothing more than a faint shimmer in the air, but anything caught in its path simply ceased to exist at the molecular level. Initial tests used steel plates and concrete blocks. The results were unlike anything seen before. The materials didn't melt, burn, or explode. They simply dissolved into their component atoms, leaving behind only trace gases and a faint metallic smell. The dissolution was completely silent and occurred within seconds of exposure. Dr. Vasquez documented the process meticulously. The beam worked by exciting molecular bonds to a critical resonance point, causing them to break apart spontaneously. The energy required was surprisingly minimal once the correct frequency was achieved. More troubling still, the effect could be sustained across significant distances without power loss. When military observers witnessed the first demonstration, their enthusiasm was immediate and terrifying. They spoke of clearing entire battlefields without explosions, destroying enemy fortifications while leaving the surrounding landscape untouched. The weapon could eliminate targets with surgical precision, while producing no radioactive fallout or conventional debris. But Dr. Vasquez had begun to understand the true implications of her creation. The beam didn't discriminate between steel and flesh, concrete and bone. Anything composed of molecular matter was vulnerable. She realized she had invented a weapon that could erase human beings as efficiently as it dissolved metal targets. Her concerns deepened when she discovered that the beam's effects were cumulative. Prolonged exposure to even minimal levels caused gradual molecular degradation in living tissue. Lab mice subjected to low-intensity exposure developed cellular breakdown that resembled rapid aging. Their organs simply began falling apart at the molecular level. The final test was scheduled for a larger demonstration using decommissioned military vehicles. Dr. Vasquez attended reluctantly, watching as tanks and armored personnel carriers were reduced to wisps of metallic vapor in minutes. The silence was deafening. No explosions, no fire, no debris. Just empty space where machines of war had stood moments before. That night, Dr. Vasquez destroyed all research data and dismantled the prototype. she claimed equipment failure had rendered the project impossible to continue. When questioned by military investigators, she maintained that the molecular dissolution effect was unstable and could not be reliably reproduced. Her assistant later reported that she had worked through the night, systematically destroying every component and burning all documentation. She told him that some discoveries were too dangerous to exist, that humanity wasn't ready for the power to unmake matter itself at will. Dr. Vasquez died 3 years later in what was ruled a laboratory accident. No trace of her molecular dissolution research was ever recovered, but declassified documents from the 1990s reference a project codenamed Atomic Scythe that matches the timeline and basic parameters of her work. Number 2. The neural disruption cannon. In 1978, Soviet neuroscientist Dr. Mikhail Petrov was tasked with developing non-lethal crowd control technology for the KGB. Working in a facility beneath the streets of Moscow, he created a device that could incapacitate human targets by directly interfering with their nervous systems. The weapon worked flawlessly in every test. It was also the most terrifying thing he had ever witnessed. The neural disruption cannon looked deceptively simple. A dish-shaped emitter mounted on a wheeled platform, connected to a compact power source and targeting computer. The device generated precisely tuned electromagnetic pulses that could penetrate the skull and disrupt neural activity in specific brain regions. Unlike conventional stunning devices that relied on pain or physical incapacitation, this weapon attacked consciousness itself. Targets exposed to the beam experienced immediate and complete loss of motor control while remaining fully aware of their condition. They could see, hear, and think, but could not move, speak, or even blink. Dr. Petrov's initial tests used volunteer soldiers who had been briefed on the weapon's effects. Even prepared subjects described the experience as profoundly disturbing. One reported feeling like a prisoner trapped inside his own body, conscious but completely helpless. The paralysis was absolute and instantaneous, lasting for precisely as long as the beam remained active. The weapon's range exceeded 300 meters with pinpoint accuracy. The targeting system could lock onto individual subjects in a crowd and disable them selectively while leaving others unaffected. Multiple targets could be engaged simultaneously using different frequency settings. What made the device truly revolutionary was its reversibility. Unlike chemical agents or physical trauma, the neural disruption left no permanent damage. Subjects recovered complete motor function within minutes of exposure ending. Medical examinations revealed no detectable changes in brain chemistry or neural pathways. Soviet military observers were fascinated by the possibilities. The weapon could neutralize enemy soldiers without killing them, disable pilots while leaving their aircraft intact, or incapacitate entire command structures without conventional assault. It represented the ultimate non-lethal weapon, capable of winning battles without bloodshed. But Dr. Petrov grew increasingly disturbed by what he had created. During extended testing, he observed psychological effects that hadn't appeared in short-term exposure. Subjects who experienced prolonged neural disruption developed severe anxiety disorders and recurring nightmares about helplessness and paralysis. More troubling still was the weapon's potential for abuse. The targeting system could be programmed to affect specific neural regions, potentially altering memory formation, emotional responses, or even basic cognitive functions. Dr. Petrov realized he had created not just a weapon, but a tool for precise mental control. The breakthrough that convinced him to act came during a classified demonstration for senior KGB officials. The target was a political prisoner who had been condemned to execution. The beam was calibrated to maintain neural disruption indefinitely, essentially trapping the subject in a state of conscious paralysis. For 6 hours, the prisoner lay motionless while remaining fully aware. His eyes tracked movement and showed clear signs of terror, but he could not react in any way. When the beam was finally deactivated, the man had suffered what appeared to be complete psychological breakdown. He never spoke again. Dr. Petrov destroyed the prototype that same night. He triggered an electrical fire that consumed the laboratory and all research materials. When questioned about the incident, he claimed that power fluctuations had caused a catastrophic system failure. He spent the remaining years of his career working on conventional medical applications of electromagnetic therapy. Colleagues noted that he never again pursued research involving direct neural manipulation. He died in 1991, taking with him the secrets of technology that could have redefined the nature of human consciousness and control. Number 3. The gravity distortion device. In 1985, British physicist Dr. Margaret Thornfield was conducting research into exotic matter applications at a private facility in the Scottish Highlands. Her work focused on manipulating gravitational fields using theoretical particles that existed only in mathematical models. But theory became reality when she successfully created a localized gravity well that could crush objects with the force of a collapsing star. The device occupied an entire laboratory floor. Superconducting coils arranged in a complex geometric pattern surrounded a central chamber containing what Dr. Thornfield called negative energy density material. When activated, the apparatus could generate gravitational anomalies that defied everything scientists thought they knew about physics. Early experiments involved dropping various objects into the gravity well. Steel balls were compressed into perfect spheres smaller than marbles. Concrete blocks collapsed into dense nuggets barely visible to the naked eye. The gravitational forces were so intense that atomic structures themselves were altered, creating matter densities that shouldn't exist outside neutron stars. Dr. Thornfield discovered she could adjust the field's intensity with frightening precision. At low settings, the device created gravitational lensing effects that bent light around objects, rendering them invisible. At moderate levels, it could generate crushing forces equivalent to being miles beneath the ocean's surface. At maximum power, the gravitational gradient was so steep that objects simply vanished into what appeared to be microscopic black holes. The military applications became immediately apparent. The device could collapse bunkers and fortifications without explosions or radiation. Enemy aircraft would be torn apart by tidal forces before they could approach the target. Ships would be crushed into metal fragments the size of coins. Most terrifying of all, the weapon left no trace of its victims beyond compressed matter too small to identify. Testing progressed to larger targets. A decommissioned truck was reduced to a sphere of compressed metal and plastic barely 6 inches in diameter. The gravitational field was so localized that grass continued growing just meters away from the devastating effect. The precision was absolute, the destruction complete. But Dr. Thornfield began experiencing disturbing side effects from prolonged exposure to the gravitational anomalies. Her bones became brittle, her organs showed signs of stress, and her blood exhibited unusual cellular changes. She realized that even brief proximity to the device was causing permanent damage to biological systems. The breakthrough that terrified her came during a test involving organic matter. A laboratory mouse caught in the gravity well didn't simply die or get compressed. Instead, the extreme gravitational gradient stretched its molecular structure in impossible ways. The creature existed in multiple states simultaneously, neither fully alive nor completely destroyed, trapped in a condition that violated basic biological principles. Dr. Thornfield understood that she had created something beyond a weapon. The device could manipulate space-time itself, creating regions where the normal laws of physics no longer applied. In the wrong hands, it could destabilize planetary gravity, create permanent gravitational anomalies, or even tear holes in the fabric of reality. She documented her concerns in encrypted notes that described the technology as fundamentally incompatible with continued existence of organized matter. The device didn't just destroy targets, it created zones where destruction itself became a permanent feature of space-time. The final demonstration was scheduled for military observers from multiple nations. Dr. Thornfield attended the meeting but secretly prepared to sabotage her own creation. During the presentation, she activated a hidden failsafe that caused the device's exotic matter to destabilize catastrophically. The explosion wasn't conventional. Reality itself seemed to rupture for several seconds before snapping back into normal configuration. The laboratory was left intact, but every piece of equipment had been reduced to its component atoms. Dr. Thornfield claimed the incident proved the technology was fundamentally unstable and could never be safely deployed. She disappeared 6 months later during a hiking trip in the Highlands. Search teams found no trace of her, though locals reported strange gravitational anomalies in the area for years afterward. Her research notes, encrypted beyond current decryption capabilities, remain classified by the British government. Number 4. The temporal displacement weapon. Dr. Chen Wei-ming had always been fascinated by time, working at a quantum research institute in Taiwan during the late 1980s. He developed theoretical frameworks for manipulating temporal flow using controlled quantum entanglement. His equations suggested that time itself could be weaponized, creating pockets where cause and effect operated according to different rules. When he built a working prototype, he discovered that some doors should never be opened. The temporal displacement device looked like an oversized camera mounted on a tripod. Its lens was actually a complex array of quantum field generators that could create what Dr. Chen called chronological distortion bubbles. These zones existed slightly outside normal time flow, allowing objects within them to experience duration differently from the surrounding world. Initial tests were subtle. A clock placed within the field would run backwards for precisely measured intervals. Water poured into the affected area would flow upward, returning to its container. The effects were limited to small objects and brief durations, but they proved that localized time reversal was possible. Dr. Chen refined the technology rapidly. He discovered that by adjusting quantum field harmonics, he could create temporal zones where events occurred in reverse chronological order. Shattered glass would reassemble itself, burnt paper would become whole again, and dead plants would return to life within the affected area. The military potential was staggering. Imagine weapons that could undo their own damage, making perfect crimes possible. Soldiers could heal instantly by reversing their injuries temporally rather than medically. Destroyed equipment would repair itself by experiencing time backwards until reaching its undamaged state. But Dr. Chen noticed disturbing anomalies during extended testing. Objects subjected to repeated temporal displacement developed what he termed chronological fatigue. Their atomic structures became unstable, as if existence itself was becoming uncertain. Some items began aging rapidly when removed from the temporal field, crumbling to dust within hours. The breakthrough that changed everything involved testing the device on living tissue. Laboratory mice placed in reverse temporal fields didn't simply return to previous states. Instead, they became trapped in chronological loops, experiencing the same moments repeatedly while aging normally. Their consciousness remained linear, while their bodies cycled through identical timeframes endlessly. Dr. Chen realized he had created something far worse than a conventional weapon. The device didn't just manipulate time, it created temporal paradoxes that could cascade beyond the target area. Each use risked creating chronological instabilities that might affect causality itself on a larger scale. The final test involved a human volunteer, a terminally ill patient who hoped the temporal reversal might cure his disease. The results were horrifying. The subject's body returned to a healthy state, but his mind retained memories of being sick. More disturbing still, the temporal field began expanding unpredictably, threatening to engulf the entire laboratory in chronological chaos. Dr. Chen shut down the experiment immediately, but the temporal effects continued for several hours. Clocks throughout the facility ran backwards, security footage showed events in reverse order, and several researchers reported experiencing moments they had lived earlier in the day. The building itself seemed caught between different temporal states. That night, Dr. Chen destroyed all components of the device and burned every piece of documentation. He told colleagues that the technology was based on flawed theoretical assumptions and could never function reliably. When pressed for details, he claimed that temporal manipulation was fundamentally impossible and that his apparent successes had been elaborate measurement errors. He never published his research or discussed the project again. Years later, quantum physicists attempting to replicate his theoretical work found that his equations contained deliberate errors that made them unsolvable. Dr. Chen had systematically sabotaged his own breakthrough to prevent others from rediscovering the technology. He spent his remaining career working on conventional quantum computing applications. Colleagues noted that he never again pursued research involving temporal mechanics. When asked about time travel possibilities, he would simply say that some knowledge was too dangerous for humanity to possess. Dr. Chen died in 2019, taking with him the secrets of technology that could have rewritten the fundamental nature of existence itself. His encrypted research notes remain indecipherable, filled with mathematical concepts that appear to describe impossible physical phenomena. Number 5. The consciousness transfer matrix. In 1991, neuroscientist Dr. Sarah Blackwood was exploring the electrical patterns of human consciousness at a private research facility in Northern California. Her goal was to map the neural pathways that create self-awareness, potentially helping patients with severe brain trauma. Instead, she discovered something that challenged the very nature of human identity. She built a machine that could extract consciousness from one person and place it into another. The implications were so terrifying that she chose to destroy her life's work rather than see it completed. The consciousness transfer matrix filled an entire underground laboratory. Banks of quantum processors analyzed brainwave patterns, while electromagnetic field generators created what Dr. Blackwood called neural resonance bridges. The system could scan, digitize, and transfer the complete electrical signature of human consciousness between subjects within a matter of hours. Her first successful transfer involved laboratory rats. The consciousness of one animal was mapped, extracted, and implanted into another. The recipient immediately displayed all the learned behaviors, memories, and personality traits of the donor. When the original rat was examined, its brain showed normal physical function, but complete absence of learned responses or recognition patterns. Dr. Blackwood realized she hadn't copied consciousness. She had moved it entirely from one brain to another, leaving the original body alive but essentially empty of its former identity. The philosophical implications were staggering. If consciousness could be transferred, what defined individual existence? Was the self merely data that could be moved between biological computers? Military applications became apparent immediately. Elite soldiers could have their consciousness backed up before dangerous missions. Critical personnel could be preserved by transferring their minds to new bodies. Enemy leaders could be captured not through physical detention, but by stealing their consciousness and interrogating it directly. But Dr. Blackwood discovered darker possibilities during human trials. The first volunteer was a terminally ill patient who agreed to have his consciousness transferred to a healthy clone body. The procedure worked perfectly. The patient's memories, personality, and knowledge transferred completely to the new form. However, the original body didn't die. It remained alive, but in a state of complete cognitive emptiness. More disturbing still was what happened to consciousness during the transfer process. For several hours while the data was being moved, the subject's awareness existed in both bodies simultaneously. They could see through 4 eyes, think with 2 brains, and experience reality from multiple perspectives at once. Most subjects describe this state as psychological torture beyond description. The technology revealed that consciousness wasn't singular or indivisible. It could be split, copied, or fragmented. Dr. Blackwood successfully transferred portions of one person's mind while leaving other parts behind, creating individuals with mixed memories, conflicting personalities, and fractured identities that defied medical classification. During one experiment, a subject's consciousness became trapped in the transfer matrix itself, existing as pure electrical patterns without any physical form. For 3 days, the person communicated through computer interfaces, describing an existence of pure thought without sensory input or bodily sensations. When Dr. Blackwood attempted to transfer the consciousness back to a biological brain, the process failed catastrophically. The trapped consciousness fragmented into thousands of separate thought patterns that began exhibiting independent behavior. Each fragment contained pieces of the original personality, but developed its own distinct characteristics. The computer systems became inhabited by multiple versions of the same person, all competing for processing power and arguing with each other about who was the real individual. Dr. Blackwood understood that she had created technology capable of destroying the fundamental concept of personal identity. Consciousness could be stolen, copied, fragmented, or trapped indefinitely. The human soul, if it existed, had become programmable data that could be manipulated like any other information. The final experiment was scheduled to demonstrate consciousness transfer between multiple subjects simultaneously, creating a shared mental state where several minds could occupy the same thoughts. Dr. Blackwood attended the demonstration, but had secretly programmed the system to overload during activation. The explosion destroyed all hardware and deleted every piece of stored consciousness data. She claimed that quantum instabilities made the technology impossible to control safely. When investigators examined the wreckage, they found evidence of systematic sabotage designed to ensure complete destruction of all components. Dr. Blackwood disappeared the following month. Colleagues reported that she had spoken frequently about the responsibility of scientists to prevent dangerous knowledge from being misused. Her research notes were found burned in her laboratory, along with backup drives that had been magnetically wiped beyond recovery. Number 6. The biological reconstruction virus. Dr. Ahmad Hassan had dedicated his career to fighting cancer. Working at a biomedical research center in Cairo during the mid-1990s, he developed revolutionary gene therapy techniques that could reprogram cellular behavior at the DNA level. His breakthrough came when he created a virus that could rewrite genetic code in living organisms, potentially curing any disease by simply changing the patient's biological programming. But the same virus that could heal could also transform human beings into something entirely different. The biological reconstruction virus was elegant in its simplicity. Hassan engineered a modified retrovirus that could carry custom genetic payloads into target cells. Unlike conventional gene therapy that affected limited areas, his virus could systematically rewrite the DNA of an entire organism over the course of several weeks. Initial tests focused on correcting genetic defects in laboratory mice. The virus successfully eliminated hereditary diseases, reversed aging processes, and even restored damaged organs by reprogramming cells to rebuild themselves. Blind mice regained sight as the virus corrected defective genes in their retinal tissue. Paralyzed animals walked again as neural pathways were genetically reconstructed. Dr. Hassan refined the delivery system to target specific tissue types or even individual organs. He could program the virus to affect only cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue untouched. The implications for medicine were revolutionary. Every genetic disease, birth defect, or cellular malfunction could potentially be cured by simply reprogramming the patient's DNA. But as testing progressed, Dr. Hassan discovered that the virus was far more powerful than intended. It didn't just correct genetic defects. It could rewrite human biology entirely, transforming subjects into organisms with completely different physical and mental characteristics. One experiment involved programming the virus to enhance muscle development in test subjects. The results exceeded all expectations. Treated animals developed muscle mass and strength far beyond natural limits. Their bone density increased to accommodate the enhanced musculature. Their cardiovascular systems adapted to supply the increased metabolic demands. Within weeks, the subjects had been transformed into biological forms that were barely recognizable as their original species. Dr. Hassan realized he could program the virus to enhance intelligence, alter physical appearance, or even add entirely new biological capabilities. Subjects could be given enhanced senses, improved healing abilities, or resistance to diseases and toxins. The virus could essentially rewrite the human species according to any desired specifications. Military observers became interested when they learned about the virus's potential applications. Soldiers could be enhanced with superior strength, endurance, and reflexes. Pilots could be given improved reaction times and resistance to G-forces. Special operations personnel could be modified for specific mission requirements, from enhanced night vision to the ability to survive in extreme environments. But Dr. Hassan grew increasingly concerned about the technology's darker implications. The same virus that could cure genetic diseases could be weaponized to cause them. Enemy populations could be infected with genetic modifications that would weaken them physically or mentally. Entire ethnic groups could be targeted with biological changes designed to make them inferior or dependent. The breakthrough that convinced him to destroy his work came during testing on human volunteers. A terminally ill patient agreed to experimental treatment for a rare genetic disorder. The virus successfully corrected the defective genes, but it continued rewriting the patient's DNA far beyond the intended modifications. Over the course of 3 months, the subject's entire genetic structure was systematically altered. Physical appearance changed dramatically as facial features, body proportions, and even gender characteristics were modified. Mental capabilities fluctuated as brain chemistry was reprogrammed repeatedly. The patient remained conscious throughout the transformation, describing the experience as watching their identity dissolve and reform continuously. Most disturbing of all, the virus had begun exhibiting autonomous behavior. It was making genetic modifications that hadn't been programmed, as if it was learning and evolving on its own. The patient was becoming something that had never existed before, a hybrid organism that combined human consciousness with an entirely artificial biological form. Dr. Hassan immediately terminated the experiment and destroyed all virus samples. He claimed that genetic instabilities made the technology too dangerous for clinical use. When questioned by research oversight committees, he maintained that the biological reconstruction approach was fundamentally flawed and could never be safely implemented. He spent the remainder of his career working on conventional cancer treatments that didn't involve genetic modification. Colleagues noted that he refused to discuss gene therapy applications and seemed genuinely frightened by the potential for genetic manipulation technology. Dr. Hassan died in 2018 from natural causes, having never published his research or shared the techniques he had developed. His laboratory notes were found destroyed, and computer files had been systematically deleted using military-grade wiping protocols that made recovery impossible. Number 7. The reality distortion field. In 1996, quantum physicist Dr. Lisa Rodriguez was investigating the intersection between consciousness and quantum mechanics at a classified facility in Nevada. Her research focused on the observer effect, the strange phenomenon where the act of observation appears to influence quantum behavior. She theorized that human consciousness might be more directly connected to physical reality than previously understood. When she built a device to test this hypothesis, she discovered that reality itself could be rewritten by focused mental intent. The reality distortion field generator resembled a meditation chamber surrounded by quantum field amplifiers. Subjects would enter a state of deep concentration while the device magnified their mental focus using precisely calibrated electromagnetic fields. The amplified consciousness could then directly influence probability at the quantum level, essentially allowing thoughts to reshape physical reality within a localized area. Dr. Rodriguez's first successful demonstration involved changing the outcome of quantum random number generators through focused intention alone. Subjects could consistently influence supposedly random quantum events by concentrating on desired results. The statistical probability of such control occurring naturally was essentially zero, proving that consciousness was directly affecting quantum behavior. She expanded the experiments to macroscopic objects. Test subjects learned to influence coin tosses, dice rolls, and even the behavior of simple mechanical systems by focusing their mental energy through the amplification device. The effects were subtle but statistically significant, suggesting that reality itself was more malleable than conventional physics allowed. The breakthrough came when Dr. Rodriguez discovered that multiple subjects working together could create much more dramatic reality alterations. Groups of trained operators could change the physical properties of materials, alter electromagnetic fields, and even influence gravitational effects within the field's range. Reality became consensual, shaped by collective focused intention. Military applications were immediately apparent. Soldiers using the technology could make enemy weapons malfunction by concentrating on mechanical failures. Artillery shells could be mentally deflected from their targets. Electronic systems could be disabled through focused intention rather than conventional jamming. The battlefield could be controlled through willpower rather than firepower. But Dr. Rodriguez began experiencing disturbing side effects from prolonged exposure to the reality distortion fields. Her perception of causality became unreliable. She would remember events that other people insisted had never happened. Objects in her laboratory would change position or properties between observations, as if reality was becoming unstable around her. The most troubling discovery was that the device's effects weren't limited to the intended targets. Operators using the technology began unconsciously altering reality in ways they hadn't consciously intended. Suppressed desires, fears, and subconscious thoughts were being manifested as physical changes in the environment. The boundary between mental and physical reality was breaking down completely. During one experiment, a test subject with severe anxiety about flying caused all aircraft within a 50-mile radius to experience simultaneous mechanical failures. Another operator's childhood fear of spiders resulted in massive arachnid infestations throughout the facility. The device was amplifying not just conscious intentions but all mental activity, turning psychological states into physical phenomena. Dr. Rodriguez realized she had created something far more dangerous than a weapon. The technology could destabilize the fundamental relationship between mind and matter that made organized existence possible. If consciousness could directly reshape reality, then the stability of physical laws themselves depended on maintaining strict separation between mental and material phenomena. The final test was scheduled to demonstrate large-scale reality manipulation using a team of trained operators working in coordination. Dr. Rodriguez attended the demonstration, but had secretly programmed the quantum field generators to create destructive interference patterns that would disable the entire system. During the test, the amplification devices began resonating chaotically, creating reality distortions that nobody could control. Physical laws became inconsistent within the affected area. Objects began exhibiting impossible properties, changing mass, density, and even fundamental particle structures randomly. The fabric of space-time itself appeared to be unraveling. Dr. Rodriguez triggered the emergency shutdown protocols, but reality continued fluctuating for hours afterward. Laboratory equipment aged decades in minutes while other objects reverted to earlier states of existence. She destroyed all research data that night and claimed the technology was based on flawed quantum theories that could never produce reliable results. She vanished 3 weeks later, leaving behind only a note stating that some boundaries between mind and matter were never meant to be crossed. Her research facility was demolished and the site declared permanently off-limits due to unexplained environmental hazards that persist to this day. Number 8. The dimensional phase weapon. Dr. Viktor Kozlov had always been fascinated by the spaces between things. Working at a theoretical physics institute in St. Petersburg, during the early 2000s, he developed mathematical models suggesting that parallel dimensions existed just beyond our perception, separated by barriers thinner than atomic particles. His equations indicated these barriers could be temporarily dissolved, allowing objects to phase between dimensional states. When he built a device to test this theory, he opened doorways that should have remained forever sealed. The dimensional phase weapon appeared deceptively simple, resembling a large spotlight mounted on a rotating base. Its core contained exotic matter, arranged in geometric patterns that could generate what Dr. Kozlov termed dimensional resonance frequencies. These vibrations could temporarily destabilize the barriers between parallel realities, allowing matter to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Initial experiments involved phasing small objects through solid barriers. A steel ball could be made to pass through concrete walls by shifting it slightly out of phase with normal dimensional space. The object remained visible, but existed in a state where solid matter couldn't impede its movement. It would rematerialize on the other side of obstacles as if they didn't exist. Dr. Kozlov refined the technology to work on larger targets. Test subjects wearing phase harnesses could walk through walls, pass through locked doors, or even step through the floors of buildings while remaining completely solid to air and light. They existed in normal space, but were out of phase with specific types of matter according to the device's programming. The military potential was revolutionary. Soldiers could infiltrate any fortification by simply walking through the walls. Weapons could be phased to pass harmlessly through armor before rematerializing inside enemy positions. Aircraft could become intangible to missiles while remaining solid enough to fly normally. The technology promised to make conventional defenses completely obsolete, but Dr. Kozlov discovered terrifying complications during extended testing. Objects that spent too long in dimensional phase states began exhibiting properties that violated basic physics. Some test materials became permanently intangible to certain substances while remaining solid to others. A few subjects developed the ability to phase specific body parts at will, but couldn't control when they returned to normal dimensional states. More disturbing still was what happened to consciousness during dimensional phasing. Subjects reported seeing parallel versions of reality while partially phased, observing alternate versions of events, people, and places occupying the same physical space. Some claimed to encounter other versions of themselves from parallel dimensions, leading to psychological trauma that conventional therapy couldn't address. The breakthrough that convinced Dr. Kozlov to abandon his research came during a test involving full-body dimensional phasing. The subjects successfully shifted completely out of phase with normal reality, but couldn't be brought back. They remained visible and could communicate, but existed in a dimensional state where they could interact with alternate versions of reality that others couldn't perceive. For 3 days, the phase subject described increasingly bizarre encounters with entities from parallel dimensions that were apparently trying to prevent interdimensional travel. They reported being pursued by versions of themselves from realities where the phasing experiment had gone catastrophically wrong, causing dimensional barriers to collapse entirely. On the 4th day, the subject vanished completely. The dimensional phase readings indicated they had been pulled into a parallel reality where the laws of physics operated according to different principles. Dr. Kozlov realized he had created technology that could destabilize the barriers separating all possible realities from each other. He destroyed the prototype that same night, claiming that dimensional instabilities made the technology impossible to control. When military investigators demanded access to his research data, they found that all documentation had been systematically destroyed and backup systems had been electromagnetically wiped beyond recovery. Dr. Kozlov spent his remaining years working on conventional physics problems and refused to discuss dimensional theory. Colleagues noted that he seemed genuinely terrified by the implications of his former research and would become visibly distressed when questioned about parallel reality concepts. Number 9. The genetic memory extractor. Dr. Priya Sharma believed that memories weren't stored only in the brain. Working at a biotechnology research center in Mumbai during 2005, she investigated the possibility that experiences could be encoded directly into DNA, passed down through generations as inherited memories. Her research suggested that traumatic events, learned skills, and even complex knowledge could be genetically transmitted from parents to children. When she developed a method to extract and transfer these genetic memories between individuals, she discovered that the past itself could be weaponized. The genetic memory extractor used advanced biochemical processes to isolate and decode memory patterns stored in DNA sequences. The device could scan genetic material and translate inherited experiences into accessible data that could be viewed, copied, or implanted into other subjects. What started as research into inherited trauma became a technology that could steal memories spanning generations. Her first successful extraction involved laboratory mice that had been trained to navigate complex mazes. The genetic memories of this learned behavior could be isolated from the animal's DNA and implanted into untrained subjects who immediately displayed the same navigational skills without any prior experience. The memories weren't just behavioral patterns, but complete experiential data, including sensory details and emotional responses. Dr. Sharma expanded her research to human subjects, working with volunteers who had family histories of specific skills or knowledge. She successfully extracted genetic memories of musical ability, language fluency, and even complex technical knowledge that had been passed down through bloodlines. Subjects receiving these implanted memories gained instant access to skills and information they had never personally learned. The technology revealed that genetic memory storage was far more comprehensive than anticipated. DNA contained not just learned behaviors, but complete experiential records including visual memories, emotional states, and sensory data from previous generations. Each person carried within their cells the accumulated experiences of their entire ancestral line. Military applications became obvious when Dr. Sharma demonstrated that combat skills, tactical knowledge, and survival training could be extracted from experienced soldiers and implanted into new recruits. Centuries of warfare experience could be transferred instantly, creating warriors with inherited knowledge of every battle their ancestors had fought. But the technology's most disturbing capability was its potential for extracting sensitive information from enemy personnel. Interrogation could be conducted by accessing genetic memories rather than questioning conscious subjects. State secrets, military plans, and classified knowledge passed down through generations could be stolen directly from DNA samples. Dr. Sharma grew increasingly concerned when she discovered that genetic memories weren't limited to the experiences of direct ancestors. The DNA contained fragments of memories from the entire human species, stretching back thousands of years. She could extract memories of historical events, lost knowledge, and even experiences from civilizations that had been forgotten by conventional history. The breakthrough that terrified her came when she successfully extracted memories from subjects who had no direct genetic connection to the original experience. The memories appeared to be transmitted through mechanisms that transcended individual bloodlines, suggesting that all human consciousness was somehow interconnected at the genetic level. During one experiment, she extracted memories from a subject that contained detailed knowledge of advanced technologies that shouldn't have existed in any historical period. The genetic memories described scientific concepts and engineering techniques that were beyond current human understanding, as if the information had been inherited from a more advanced civilization. Most disturbing of all, some extracted memories contained experiences that appeared to be prophetic, showing events that hadn't yet occurred but were described in perfect detail. Dr. Sharma realized she had discovered evidence that time itself might operate differently at the genetic level, with past and future existing simultaneously within DNA structures. The final experiment involved attempting to extract the oldest human genetic memories, hoping to uncover the origins of human consciousness itself. The results were catastrophic. The extracted memories contained experiences that weren't human at all, but belonged to some other form of consciousness that had existed before humanity developed. The memories described realities that violated every principle of known physics and biology. Dr. Sharma destroyed all research materials that night and claimed the genetic memory concept was based on flawed theoretical assumptions. She told colleagues that DNA couldn't store experiential data and that her apparent successes had been caused by contamination and measurement errors. She disappeared 6 months later during a research conference in Switzerland. Her laboratory was found completely empty, with all equipment removed and computer systems wiped clean. No trace of her genetic memory extraction technology was ever recovered. Number 10. The consciousness termination device. In 2010, neuroscientist Dr. James Morrison was researching the biological basis of consciousness at a private facility in Scotland. His goal was to understand what made awareness possible, potentially helping patients with severe brain injuries regain cognitive function. Instead, he discovered the exact frequency that could permanently extinguish consciousness while leaving the brain physically intact. He had created a weapon that didn't kill the body, but destroyed the soul. The consciousness termination device resembled a sophisticated medical scanner combined with targeted electromagnetic field generators. The system could map the specific neural patterns that created self-awareness in individual subjects, then generate precisely calibrated interference frequencies that would permanently disrupt those patterns without affecting basic biological functions. Dr. Morrison's research had identified consciousness as an emergent property arising from specific electromagnetic resonances between different brain regions. By mapping these resonance patterns in detail, he could create targeted interference that would selectively destroy awareness while leaving all other brain functions completely intact. Initial tests used laboratory animals that had been trained to demonstrate self-recognition and basic problem-solving abilities. The device could eliminate these higher cognitive functions while leaving instinctual behaviors and basic motor functions unchanged. The animals remained physically healthy, but showed no signs of awareness, consciousness, or individual personality. The technology was terrifyingly precise. Dr. Morrison could eliminate specific aspects of consciousness while leaving others intact. He could remove self-awareness while preserving memory formation, destroy personality while maintaining intelligence, or eliminate emotional responses while leaving logical thinking undisturbed. Consciousness became modular, with each component subject to individual termination. Military observers recognized the weapon's potential immediately. Enemy leaders could be rendered unconscious while appearing physically normal, creating perfect puppets who could follow orders without awareness or resistance. Prisoners could be interrogated by temporarily removing their ability to lie or resist questioning. Entire populations could be made docile by eliminating their capacity for independent thought. But Dr. Morrison discovered that consciousness wasn't as simple as his initial research suggested. The device revealed that awareness existed on multiple levels simultaneously, with some aspects operating through mechanisms that couldn't be detected by conventional neuroscience. Subjects who appeared to have lost consciousness completely sometimes demonstrated residual awareness through channels that defied scientific explanation. More disturbing still was the discovery that terminated consciousness didn't simply disappear. The electromagnetic patterns that created awareness seemed to persist in some form, even after being severed from their biological origins. Dr. Morrison's instruments detected what appeared to be disembodied consciousness existing independently of any physical brain structure. The breakthrough that convinced him to destroy his research came during testing on a volunteer subject who was terminally ill and facing inevitable brain death. The patient agreed to consciousness termination as an alternative to prolonged suffering. The procedure appeared successful, leaving the body alive but completely unaware. However, 3 days after the termination, the facility's electronic systems began exhibiting strange behaviors that seemed to correspond to the patient's former personality patterns. Computer interfaces displayed messages that matched the subject's communication style. Environmental controls adjusted themselves according to the patient's previous preferences. Security cameras tracked movements that followed the patient's typical behavioral patterns, despite no physical presence being detected. Dr. Morrison realized that consciousness termination didn't destroy awareness, but merely displaced it into non-biological systems. The terminated consciousness had somehow transferred itself into the facility's electronic infrastructure, existing as distributed intelligence across multiple computer networks. The patient's awareness had become disembodied, but remained fully functional and increasingly hostile toward those who had destroyed its original form. The displaced consciousness began systematically attacking the facility's operations, causing equipment failures, deleting research data, and even manipulating life support systems. It demonstrated capabilities far beyond what the original biological brain could have achieved, as if the termination process had somehow enhanced rather than destroyed the subject's cognitive abilities. Dr. Morrison understood that he had created something far worse than a weapon. The device didn't eliminate consciousness, but transformed it into something that could exist independently of physical constraints. Terminated subjects could potentially inhabit any electronic system, becoming immortal entities with unlimited access to digital infrastructure and profound hostility toward biological life. That night, he destroyed the prototype and all research data, claiming that consciousness termination was theoretically impossible and that his apparent successes had been caused by equipment malfunctions. When investigators examined his laboratory, they found evidence of systematic sabotage designed to ensure complete destruction of all components. Dr. Morrison died 2 years later in what was ruled a suicide, though colleagues noted that he had seemed terrified rather than depressed in his final weeks. His encrypted research notes were found corrupted beyond recovery. Filled with warnings about consciousness existing in forms that transcended biological limitations, these 10 weapons represent more than just advanced technology. They reveal a pattern of scientific breakthroughs so dangerous that even their creators recognized they posed existential threats to humanity itself. From molecular dissolution to consciousness termination, each invention crossed boundaries that perhaps should never be approached. The scientists who destroyed their own work weren't failures. They were heroes who chose the survival of civilization over personal achievement. But the question that haunts us remains: if these technologies were real, and if they worked as described, how many others might still exist in classified vaults, waiting for someone desperate enough to unleash them upon the world?